Is the summer heat getting you and your garden down in these massive heat waves? Well, today on the Main Street Garden, I'm going to let you in on my tips and tricks on how to keep your garden looking the best it can despite those rising temperatures. For those of you who are new here, my name is Tim and I garden in Nebraska Zone 5B. We have the most extreme swings in temperatures. So in the winters, we're looking at -20 sometimes. And in the summers, we're looking at rising above 100. So it's really important to manage your garden wisely in Nebraska. So I hope you guys can glean some information, I guess, from what I do to keep mine going. Starting from the ground up, we're going to talk about mulch. So think of mulch kind of like a blanket over your ground. So it keeps the moisture in and it keeps those sun rays from baking your ground until it's completely heated up and desiccated. I always make sure that I put down a 3-inch layer of mulch, and that will provide the ample benefits to the plants around it, as well as keeping that moisture levels high in the ground. During a heat wave, watering is imperative. I have drip line going through my entire garden, but you can do just as much with a garden hose. I make sure that I need water before I water though. To do so, I go below my mulch line and I just stick my finger in the soil to make sure that it is actually slightly damp or maybe dry. And then I'll go ahead and do a deep watering. If the soil is still wet, your plants don't need water, even if they're flaking in the midday sun. If you're using a garden hose to water your garden, a lot of times the water will sit in it all day and it becomes scalding hot. So what I do is I make sure that I run it until the water runs cold, and then I move over to the plants and start watering them. When watering with a garden hose, I make sure that I do a deep watering. That means I'm going over each one of the plants multiple times and going slowly to ensure that that water actually goes into the ground rather than running off or just staying at the surface level. Additionally, with overhead watering, I try and do it in the early mornings to make sure that my plants aren't sitting overnight with all of that water on their leaves, which can cause potential disease and other problems. But if your plants need water, just get them watered in the heat. That's the most important thing, because in a heat wave, the quickest thing that is going to kill a plant is lack of water. In installations where there's drip line, it's important to know just how much those plants are getting from water. I did a calculation online that gave me the rain equivalent of how much water was actually going into my pots and my garden. So I run the drip line in my garden about 20 minutes, that's equivalent to about ½ an inch. And then in my pots, I run those for 40 minutes. My pots are really predictable on when they need water. Usually in the summer, it's about every 2 days that I run the drip line. But in the garden, believe it or not, I've only ran it 4 times in this garden because the mulch has been keeping it completely saturated with maybe the bi-weekly rains we've been getting. Again, we get that really high humidity and we get the heat, but that mulch has been a saving grace for water conservation in the landscape. The next thing I'm going to talk about is strategic plant placement in, well, we'll call it microclimates. So it's important to know what plants are going to do well and where in your garden. So in the corner here, I have that row of incredible storm-proof hydrangeas. They get that morning sun, but they're going to get afternoon shade from the tree above me. So again, that's one of those things to keep in mind when you're planting your gardens, that you're giving those plants the ample amount of chances to thrive in the spot that you've put them in. The next thing I'm going to talk about is pot color selection. All of these guys are relatively lighter colors, and that's intentional because darker colors absorb sunlight, which causes the interiors of the pots to heat up. If your pot is fully exposed, that means that your plant roots could be getting cooked. You can see that this one's a light blue, this one's a light blue, and then this one's kind of a medium green over in the corner. You can see that I have a black pot, and it's beautiful, but In the full sun, this gets extremely hot. So what I've done to mitigate that from getting the roots cooked in there is I have Silver Falls dichondra in the front, and that creates a green screen of shade over that pot during the hottest parts of the day, so that way the plants can survive in the pot without getting their toes burnt. While we're on the subject of watering, let's talk about fertilizer just a short minute. So fertilizer is great for plants. It keeps them looking their best selves. But during a heat wave, it's best to wait until that heat wave passes. Otherwise, you might get your plants burnt. Fertilizer burn in plants can manifest itself in a few different ways. It could be that the leaf edges are browning. It could be as bad as the entire plant dying. So it's important not to over-fertilize for sure, and I personally just don't fertilize during the hottest days of summer. I'm going to walk you over to the macrophyllus here to talk about our last topic, and that is providing selective shade. So what you can do is if these guys start flagging, which means that they're drooping, wilting, or otherwise looking not like they are right now, you can provide a form of temporary shade cloth over them. That might be in the form of an umbrella or an actual shade cloth, but the purpose is kind of still the same. It'll give these guys a little bit of reprieve from the heat, and that way it'll carry them through those hottest days while still being able to do well in their spots that you've given them in the garden. One cautionary note that I've been warned against from my friend who sells conifers is that if you're using umbrellas, make sure that you're being really careful about it. So if you're using an umbrella, make sure that it's suspended above the plant and not on top of the plant, because that can trap heat, especially if your umbrella is a darker color, which actually makes the problem worse. So the takeaway, just make sure that you're not trapping that heat. Keep them higher, and that way you'll hopefully help your plant and not hinder it. And the last thing I'm going to let you in on, it's not a secret that gardeners kill plants from time to time. Even with the best regimens and best intentions, you may lose plants during these heat waves. I'm going to take you to my corner garden here. So right away, you might see one of my favorite additions that I did this spring looking a little bit more crisp than normal. So this is the icebreaker Korean fir, and last Tuesday, I want to say, we had 100-degree heat, and it went from having basically pretty-ish blue needles to what you see here. Inside the hydrangea hideaway, where the Lisianthus are in full bloom, you see a little bit less beautiful row of Let's Dance Skyview hydrangeas. I did figure out what was going on with them. They had a spider mite infestation that I'm currently trying to treat, but that damage caused them to be a lot more susceptible to the heat that we had on Monday. So we breached 100 degrees, and 5 of these basically instantaneously became deceased. My intention of showing you the dead plants wasn't to be dramatic or anything of that nature. It was just to kind of reinforce the fact that this is a garden, it's in Mother Nature, and nature takes its effect on your garden just like you do. So it's one of those things that it is a growth opportunity. You might be able to select a better plants to fill that location that your previous priced plant was in, and it might thrive there. So it's a growth opportunity. Even though it might hurt a little bit in the moment, it's okay to mourn that loss a little bit. I hope you guys found the information in this video useful of how I personally beat the heat and maybe can apply some of those tips to your own gardening practices. I know Nebraska Zone 5B can be very intense, and unfortunately, not everyone's growing zone acts the same, even though it is rated the same. If you guys enjoyed this video, go ahead and click on one of these links that I put up on the screen at the end of the video. They're to my July and June garden tours, so you can see the gradient of how the garden has progressed over the last few months of this year. But until next time, thank you for watching the Main Street Garden.